The hum of the fluorescent lights above was the only sound in the sterile office hallway as I walked towards Mark's office. 10 years. A decade of my life poured into Innovate Dynamics. 10 years of late nights fueled by lukewarm coffee, of whiteboarding sessions that felt like intellectual marathons, of debugging code until my eyes burned, all for the thrill of watching complex systems hum to life. 10 years of building, innovating, making myself indispensable. And now, this summons. My name is Evelyn. Engineering wasn't just a job for me, it was a calling. I'd been a wide-eyed graduate when I first joined Innovate Dynamics, a company still finding its footing in the tech landscape. They promised innovation, challenging work, and a place where bright minds could thrive. For a long time, they delivered. I found my niche quickly, diving deep into system architecture. I loved the logic, the elegant solutions to messy problems, the feeling of creating something from nothing. My career trajectory was a steady climb. I proved my worth project after project, earning the respect of my colleagues and even some of the higher-ups. I wasn't flashy. I didn't play office politics. But I built systems that worked. Systems that were robust, scalable, and surprisingly intuitive beneath their complex exteriors. About 5 years in, I was tapped for the lead architecture role on what would become our flagship product, Nexus Core. It was an ambitious project, designed to be the central nervous system for businesses, handling everything from data processing to critical communications. It was a beast of a project, sprawling and interconnected, and I was given the responsibility of designing its fundamental structure, the very backbone upon which everything else would be built. I lived and breathed Nexus Core for years. I designed the core data flow, the security protocols, the modular architecture that allowed for future expansion. I knew every single line of critical code, every potential choke point, every elegant workaround I'd devised under pressure. Other engineers built on top of my foundation, adding features, refining interfaces, but I held the blueprints, the deep, intuitive understanding of why things were built the way they were. I was the quiet engine of that team, the one people came to when they hit an unsolvable problem, the one who could trace a bug back to its origin with uncanny speed. Mark Jenkins became my boss about 3 years ago. He'd come from a competitor, brought in to optimize our department. At first, he seemed all right, sharp, focused. But over time, I saw a shift. His focus narrowed to metrics, to cost savings, to buzzwords about efficiency and scaling teams. The appreciation for deep technical knowledge, the kind I possessed, seemed to wane, replaced by a desire for easily quantifiable results and replaceable parts. He saw engineers as cogs, interchangeable and cost-adjustable. Nexus Core had been a massive success. It had propelled Innovate Dynamics into the big leagues, attracting major clients and significantly boosting our stock price. My role in its success was acknowledged, mostly internally, in performance reviews that praised my critical contributions but rarely came with compensation increases that matched my value. It didn't matter, I told myself. The work was rewarding. I was secure. I was indispensable. The summons from Mark came on a Tuesday afternoon. No prior warning, no unusual project review. Just a calendar invite titled, Discussion, Evelyn Reed. My stomach did a nervous little flip, but I pushed it down. Maybe it was finally that promotion I'd been hinting at, or a new challenging project. I smoothed my skirt and took a deep breath, walking towards his glass-walled office. He didn't smile when I sat down. His face was impassive, almost clinical. He had a folder in front of him. This wasn't good. Evelyn, he started, his voice devoid of warmth. Thank you for coming in. Standard opening. My heart started to pound. As you know, he continued, shuffling papers he wasn't looking at, Innovate Dynamics is constantly looking for ways to optimize our resources and increase efficiency. We're in a competitive market, and we need to be agile. Buzzwords: agile, optimize, resources. My mind raced. What was this about? He finally looked up, his gaze direct but cold. We've been reviewing the structure of the Nexus Core team. While your contributions over the years, particularly with the initial architecture, have been noted. He paused, and a knot formed in my stomach. We've identified a redundancy. Redundancy. The word hit me like a physical blow. Me? Redundant? The architect of Nexus Core? Given the current phase of the product lifecycle and our need to scale our development efforts more broadly, he pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the dawning horror on my face, we've decided to restructure the team. Effective immediately. Your position is being eliminated. Eliminated. Fired. After 10 years. My breath hitched. Eliminated? Mark, I built Nexus Core. I know that system better than anyone. He leaned back, a faint, almost imperceptible air of smugness about him. And we appreciate that, Evelyn. Truly. But the system is built now. It's in maintenance and feature expansion phase. That deep historical knowledge, while valuable in the past, is less critical now than raw development capacity. He picked up a different paper. We've done the analysis. Your salary, including benefits and overhead, he cited the number, roughly $175,000 a year. The number that represented my decade of expertise, my loyalty, my value. He looked at me again, his expression hardening into something that was almost a challenge. For that same expenditure, Evelyn, we can bring in 5 junior engineers, 5 developers who can contribute immediately to coding new features, handling support tickets, and working on expansion modules. That's 5 times the output for the same cost. It's a simple economic decision. 5 junior engineers for my salary, my decade of irreplaceable knowledge, the complex mental map I held of Nexus Core's inner workings, reduced to a simple equation where quantity trumped quality 5-to-1. Humiliation washed over me, hot and stinging. He didn't see me as an expert, as an architect, as the person holding the most critical knowledge. He saw me as a line item on a spreadsheet, an expensive one that could be replaced by cheaper, greener labor. But the intricacies, I stammered, trying to make him understand. The dependencies, the potential conflicts. You can't just plug 5 new people in. They don't have the context. Mark waved a dismissive hand. Training will be provided. Documentation exists. The team will figure it out. They're bright kids. Bright kids who couldn't possibly possess the decade of hands-on experience and the deep understanding of the fundamental design principles I held. It wasn't just code. It was a philosophy, a carefully constructed ecosystem I had nurtured. He slid a thin folder across the desk. This is your severance package. It outlines the terms. 2 weeks pay per year of service, standard benefits, continuation for a limited time. HR will walk you through the specifics. You'll need to clear out your desk by end of day. End of day. No transition, no handover of critical knowledge, no chance to explain the nuances of the system to the bright kids. Just gone. Discarded. My loyalty, my expertise, my decade of dedication amounted to a simple economic redundancy. I don't remember much of the walk back to my desk. My ears were ringing, my vision blurred. Colleagues smiled, oblivious. How could they know? How could they comprehend that the person who held the keys to their most important product was being unceremoniously kicked out? Packing up was a blur of motion and suppressed tears. 10 years of accumulated life on a desk, photos, trinkets, notes from old projects. Each item felt heavy, imbued with the weight of wasted effort. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like a fool for believing that hard work and expertise were enough. Mark's words echoed in my head. 5 junior engineers for your salary. The ultimate insult. I left that office building with a cardboard box in my arms and a gaping wound in my chest. The city outside seemed indifferent to the seismic shift that had just occurred in my world. I drove home on autopilot, the rage simmering beneath the shock. They thought they could replace me with 5 kids fresh out of college? They thought my knowledge, the kind that took a decade to build and couldn't be found in any documentation, was redundant? Little did Mark know, his simple economic decision was the most expensive mistake he would ever make. The first few days were a haze of anger and disbelief. I reviewed the severance package. It was standard, minimal, designed to meet the legal requirements, and nothing more. No acknowledgement of my unique contribution, no attempt to retain my knowledge. It just reinforced how little they valued me at the end. I was just gone. A historical cost to be eliminated. I didn't immediately start job searching. I needed to process, to heal from the betrayal. Friends and family offered sympathy, expressing outrage at how a company could treat someone after 10 years of loyal service, especially someone so critical to their success. They'll realize their mistake, my mom said, trying to be comforting. I wasn't so sure. Mark seemed utterly convinced he'd made a smart move. A week passed. It was a strange kind of quiet. My work email was gone, my calendar empty. The frantic pace of corporate life was suddenly absent. I started to feel a sense of detachment from Innovate Dynamics. They were a ship sailing without its navigator, but that wasn't my problem anymore. Then, my phone started ringing. It began subtly. A few missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Then, texts from former colleagues, tentative at first. Subject: Hey Evelyn, hope you're doing okay. Things are interesting here. Interesting? I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to hear about how things were going. The calls escalated. More unknown numbers. I let them go to voicemail. The first recognizable voice was Sarah's, a project manager I'd worked closely with on Nexus Core. Her voicemail was strained. Evelyn, hey, it's Sarah. Look, things are kind of crazy right now. We're hitting some unexpected snags with Nexus Core. Just wondered if you might have a minute to chat. Maybe point us in the right direction on something? No pressure at all, just really struggling with this one issue. Struggling? Interesting. I felt a flicker of grim satisfaction. The bright kids were having trouble, were they? Then came the calls from numbers higher up the food chain. People I'd only exchanged pleasantries with in the hallway, directors from other departments who occasionally interacted with Nexus Core. Their voicemails were more formal, but the underlying urgency was palpable. They needed my insight, my unique perspective. And then came Mark's call. His name flashed on my screen. My heart hammered, a mix of dread and anticipation. I stared at it, the phone vibrating in my hand. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, letting it ring into the void, but a darker impulse won out. I wanted to hear what he had to say. I swiped to answer. Evelyn? Thank God you answered. Mark's voice was tight, strained, completely different from the cold, clinical tone he'd used when he fired me. Mark, I replied, keeping my voice level, devoid of emotion. Evelyn, look, I know things. How things ended were abrupt, but we're in a bit of a situation here. A bit of a situation. Understatement of the year. I was starting to suspect. Nexus Core, he continued, his voice speeding up, a hint of panic creeping in. We're having some significant issues, critical failures in the data handling module. It's causing major outages for our top-tier clients. The team is scrambling, but they can't pinpoint the source. We've checked the logs, the recent code changes, everything. The data handling module. That was my baby, the core of the core. I had designed that system with layers of redundancy and fail-safes, but also with intricate dependencies that required a deep understanding of the overall architecture to navigate. It wasn't something you could just reverse engineer from documentation, written after the fact. And you think I can help? I asked, a dangerous calm in my voice. Evelyn, please. You built it. You know how it works, the underlying logic. The team? They're good, but they don't have the historical context you do. We just need you to take a look, maybe point us in the right direction. A quick consultation, that's all. A quick consultation, after telling me I was redundant, after replacing me with 5 people he thought were equivalent to my decade of expertise. The irony was a bitter, satisfying taste in my mouth. A quick consultation, Mark, I repeated, letting a hint of the coldness he'd shown me creep into my tone. You told me I was redundant. You said you could replace my decade of experience, my intricate knowledge of that system, with 5 junior engineers for less money. That was your simple economic decision, remember? Silence on the other end. He hadn't expected me to throw his words back at him. Evelyn, that was a business decision based on projections and resource allocation. He stammered, trying to backpedal. It was you devaluing my worth to justify getting rid of me. I cut him off, my voice rising slightly. You thought my knowledge was a cost, not an asset. You thought it was something that could be easily replicated by bright kids with documentation. Well, Mark, it seems you were wrong. His voice became pleading. Evelyn, please. This is critical. We're losing clients. The stock is dropping. Senior management is... He trailed off, the implication clear. His job was on the line. This was it. The karma. The moment I had perhaps subconsciously hoped for, but never truly believed would happen. So swiftly, so dramatically. He had made a decision based on cost and perceived redundancy, discarding the very foundation of his most valuable product. Now, that decision was destroying everything he cared about. The product, the companies, stability, his own career. You made your decision, Mark, I said, my voice firm, devoid of pity. You chose 5 bright kids over the person who built the system. You chose short-sighted cost-cutting over invaluable expertise. That system failing? That's a direct consequence of your decision. It's not my problem anymore. Evelyn, you can't... You have to help. Think of the company. Think of the company? I scoffed. Did you think of my 10 years of loyalty? Did you think of the countless hours I poured into that product? Did you think of anything beyond saving a few dollars on a spreadsheet when you told me I was redundant? I didn't wait for his answer. I hung up the phone. The silence that followed was different from the one after I was fired. This silence felt empowering. I hadn't just survived. I had been validated. My value wasn't theoretical. It was tangible, critical, and now conspicuously absent. Over the next few days, the news about Innovate Dynamics was unavoidable. Industry blogs were buzzing about the catastrophic failure of Nexus Core. News headlines spoke of significant financial losses and a plummeting stock price. Customers were publicly expressing outrage. The crisis was deep and undeniable. Then came the news I had been anticipating. It came through a former colleague who was discreetly looking for a new job himself. Mark Jenkins had been fired. Senior management had held him directly responsible for the Nexus Core disaster, specifically citing his staffing decisions as the root cause. His belief that he could replace deep expertise with cheap labor had cost the company dearly, and now it had cost him his career. His calls didn't stop. They became more frequent, more desperate. He sent emails filled with increasingly pathetic pleas. He needed my help to assess the damage, to guide the recovery effort, to explain the system's complexities. It was clear he was hoping that, by fixing the problem, he might somehow salvage his reputation, maybe even claw his way back into the company's good graces. One evening, after ignoring several calls, I received a lengthy, rambling email from him. He talked about the pressure he was under, the mistake he realized he'd made, the chaos he was leaving behind. He practically begged me to just have one conversation, to help him understand where things went wrong so he could explain it to others. Read the email slowly, a sense of finality settling over me. He was broken. His arrogance had crumbled, replaced by desperation. He was facing the direct, brutal consequences of his actions. And he still, even now, saw me as the potential solution to his problem, not recognizing the profound injustice he had inflicted. I opened a new email and typed a brief, clear response. Subject: Urgent, Nexus Core. I have received your calls and emails. When you fired me, you stated clearly that my position was redundant and that my knowledge could be replaced by 5 junior engineers for the same cost. You made a simple economic decision that devalued my decade of dedication and expertise. The current state of Nexus Core is a direct result of that decision. You chose to remove the foundational knowledge base of your most critical product and failed to adequately replace it. The chaos and failure you are now experiencing are the consequences of your actions. You made your choice. You discarded my value. I have moved on. I will not be providing any consultation or assistance regarding Nexus Core or any other matters related to Innovate Dynamics. Evelyn. I reread it, ensuring it was polite but unequivocally final. It wasn't about vengeance, not really. It was about acknowledging the truth, about the universe balancing the scales. He had sown arrogance and disregard, and he had reaped failure and professional ruin. I hit send. A wave of relief washed over me. It was over. The chapter was closed. Innovate Dynamics and Mark were no longer my concern. Their self-inflicted crisis was their own to navigate. My phone continued to ring with unknown numbers for a few more days, but I didn't answer. Eventually, they stopped. Mark's email silence was absolute after that. Being fired had been devastating, a shock that had shaken me to my core. But seeing the swift, undeniable consequences of Mark's actions, seeing karma deliver such a precise and devastating blow, was a powerful form of validation. My knowledge wasn't redundant. My expertise wasn't a cost. It was the bedrock of their success, and without it, they crumbled. The experience changed me. It taught me that loyalty in the corporate world is often a one-way street, and that true value isn't always reflected on a balance sheet until it's gone. But it also reaffirmed my belief in the power of deep expertise and the undeniable weight of karma. I wasn't defined by that firing. I was defined by the skills and knowledge they thought they could discard. And as I started to look for my next challenge, I did so with a renewed sense of confidence, knowing that my worth was not determined by a spreadsheet, but by the irreplaceable things I could create. Mark Jenkins learned that lesson the hard way. I just had to live to see it happen.